welcome to the channel. Today, we are decoding one of the absolute most stunning, yet kind of under the radar transformations in the entire tech sector, Dell's massive dominance in the AI infrastructure space. We're zeroing in on a critical window here from 2026 to 2028 and breaking down exactly how a company everyone thought of as just a legacy hardware assembler has completely redefined its position in the market. For our agenda today, we're going to start with the historic AI revenue boom, then break down the margin illusion, explore how agentic AI is driving on-premise builds, look at the momentum battle between Dell and NVIDIA, and finally, dive into the Taiwan supply chain supercycle. Let's get right into it. All right, Section 1, the historic AI revenue boom. For the longest time, right, the market viewed Dell as just a legacy hardware assembler. But man, the data tells a completely different story. We're talking about a historic $513 billion backlog, plus a staggering 757% year-over-year growth in AI servers. This really shows Dell isn't just a participant. They are basically a structural monopoly in the on-premise AI space right now. And that brings us to the Q1 FY27 shockwave. Total revenue hit a record $43.84 billion, completely crushing Wall Street estimates. But the real leading indicator you need to look at is the $24.4 billion in new orders. That gives us a book-to-bill ratio of over 1.5. Put simply, for every single server Dell builds, buyers are already ordering 1.5 more. Global demand is just wildly outpacing what the supply chain can actually deliver. Moving on to Section 2, breaking the margin illusion. So there's this massive misconception floating around the market right now. If you just look at the raw percentage, Dell's GAAP gross margin shrunk to 17.75%. And of course, critics jump all over this. But listen, that's an illusion. It's caused by highly expensive GPU and high bandwidth memory components acting as a pure cost pass-through. When you look at the reality, the actual absolute gross profit dollars being generated, it actually spiked 57% to a massive $7.9 billion. The absolute cash they're bringing in has fundamentally accelerated. And this financial gravity funnel shows exactly how they're pulling it off. While that top-level gross margin percentage shrunk, Dell executed some explosive operational leverage. They compressed their operating expenses down to an incredible 20-year low, just 8.4% of revenue. By tightening that funnel, Dell's actual operating income exploded by 154% to $4.2 billion. They literally neutralized that gross margin penalty through sheer structural modernization and massive scale. Okay, Section 3, Agentic AI drives on-premise. 120 quadrillion. Take a second to process that number. According to Goldman Sachs, that is the projected global monthly token consumption by the year 2030. To put that completely astronomical number into perspective, that's roughly equivalent to the number of grains of sand on every beach on Earth being processed every single month, and it's being driven almost entirely by one thing, agentic AI. You really need to understand the plot twist here. We're moving away from simple single-prompt chat AI, where you ask a question and get one answer. Agentic AI runs in continuous, multi-step loops. It wakes up subagents, queries databases, double-checks its own logic, and calls APIs totally autonomously. Because of this continuous loop, agentic AI consumes 100 to 1,000 times more tokens per single task than the old chat models. It's a huge leap. Now, this token explosion creates what is probably the most crucial financial reality of this entire shift. If an enterprise tries to run these continuous agentic AI workloads using variable cost cloud APIs, it literally turns into a financial black hole. The costs just run away. But if they buy a fixed CapEx Dell AI factory, research from Signal 65 shows the break-even point is just 2 months, a 60-day crossover. From a purely financial standpoint, enterprise AI compute absolutely must return to on-premise infrastructure. Which leads us to Section 4, Dell versus NVIDIA momentum. Will Dell's AI server revenue growth outpace NVIDIA's by 2028? It's a pretty provocative question, isn't it? With NVIDIA dominating all the headlines, we have to look analytically at whether Dell is actually catching up in momentum. So let's look objectively at the data. When we break down this diagnostic matrix, what emerges isn't just simple competition, but a really clear story of symbiosis. For percentage growth rate momentum, Dell definitely has the advantage. Their lower base allows for that insane triple-digit acceleration we saw earlier. NVIDIA's massive $544 billion projected base mathematically restricts their percentage growth. That said, NVIDIA absolutely retains the advantage in absolute scale and core pricing power. Ultimately, they need each other. NVIDIA holds the supply allocation of the actual chips, but Dell holds the master key to Fortune 500 distribution and strict enterprise IT integration. Because as you can see here, we're witnessing a major architectural shift from the chip to the rack. Back in the Hopper era, all the value was concentrated right in that single core silicon. But in the Blackwell and Rubin's era, with systems like the GB200 NVL72, you aren't just buying a chip anymore. You're buying a multi-million-dollar rack equipped with direct liquid cooling, high-load power shelves, and highly complex network switches. This fundamentally changes who holds the power. The value is expanding to the total system, which plays perfectly into Dell's systemic integration strengths. And finally, Section 5, Taiwan's supply chain supercycle. Look, Dell cannot deliver a $513 billion backlog alone. No way. They are mobilizing the absolute bedrock of the Taiwanese supply chain. This ecosystem operates in 3 highly specialized tiers: the L10 to L12 assembly and integration system builders, the providers of direct liquid cooling modules, and the makers of high-margin, precision structural components. Let's break these down real quick. Starting with the system integrators. Because these new racks are just unprecedented in their complexity, key players like Wistron and Foxconn are drastically scaling up their physical footprints. They're aggressively expanding those critical L11 and L12 back-end assembly and testing facilities in places like Texas and Mexico. And why this matters is super crucial. They aren't just building parts, they are physically moving the manufacturing closer to the end user to win the race against time for Dell's global clients. Next up, we hit the TDP cliff, basically the heat problem. As thermal design power jumps from 700 watts in the H100 generation to well over 1200 watts in the GB300 generation, well, that's like running a high-end microwave continuously inside a tiny server slot. Air cooling hits a hard physical limit. Because of this, direct liquid cooling has instantly transitioned from a nice-to-have niche feature to a non-negotiable standard. And this is turning liquid cooling champions like AVC, Oris, and Coolit into some of the most aggressive, high-growth stories in the entire supply chain. And finally, we have the invisible champions commanding those premium margins. When you fill a rack with liquid and heavy compute, it weighs anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. So you need companies like Fositec building extreme engineering quick disconnects just to prevent catastrophic water leaks. You need Kingslide providing patented high-load structural rails to hold all that weight safely. And you need companies like EMC and GCE providing ultra-low-loss materials and 30-layer circuit boards just to handle the massive signal transmission. These guys are the hidden winners of this supercycle. To summarize our explainer today, everything we've looked at points directly to the on-premise supercycle thesis for 2026 to 2028. Dell has successfully transitioned from being just a legacy assembler into the definitive structural monopoly for localized AI computation. They've become this indispensable trust bridge, connecting the completely unsustainable cloud costs of the Agentic AI software reality with the historic value multiplier of the Taiwanese manufacturing ecosystem. So, I want to leave you with this one final thought. We've seen how value is actively migrating from the single GPU chip to the multi-million-dollar liquid-cooled rack. As the shift from chip to rack accelerates, who will capture the next massive wave of AI infrastructure value in your portfolio? It's a pretty fascinating landscape to watch. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next one.